purpose of the session is to talk about yesterday's budget. You will have all seen the headlines in the media, and hopefully from the FWD update that was circulated yesterday, some big impacts for our sector. So we've got our colleagues here from DGA who are going to talk about some of the political aspects, go through some of the findings in the budget, but then also talk about some of the sector implications as well. I would say from the outset, we want to make it an interactive session rather than just a download. So whilst it is starred as a webinar, is, as you can see, a standard Teams call. So I was spoken to the guys at DGA earlier. We sort of decided and thought it'd be best to take questions throughout. So if anyone's got any questions as we go through, just raise your hand and we'll take them as we go along. Any points of clarification or things you want some more detail on or comments, please don't be shy. We want it to be as interactive as possible, but if you could stay on mute until we come to you, that would be great. So I think without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Catherine Morgan, Managing Partner at DGA. She's joined by two colleagues, Harvey Tebay and Josh Alec. So over to you, Catherine.
Thanks very much, James, and hi everybody. And just to add to the confusion, Josh and Harvey and myself are all in one room. So if Josh's screen is lighting up, it's because we're all in the same room together, but I'm obviously speaking. So look, great to see everybody today. As James said, we're going to run through some key elements of the budget. We'll give a general overview, and then we'll come on and talk about some of the very specific measures that are relevant to the wholesale sector, and also talk about what we're going to do as a consequence of what the things that were announced yesterday. And as James said, as we go through, please do put your hand up. You can raise your hand on the screen there, and we will come to you. Feel free to ask any questions as we go through. Very keen to make sure that this is an interactive session and we respond to any queries that you have.
We can also, people can put comments in the chat as well. I think that's a point I meant to make.
Exactly. Yeah, that's all very helpful. So just moving on to talk about the budget, and I'm sure many of you have been following it closely and have looked at a lot of the press this morning as well. And you will have seen, as well as us, that it was an absolutely huge budget. This was a really big and bold budget from the Labour Party. It is a Labour budget in the sense of it being it's certainly focused in terms of being a more left-wing budget than perhaps previous budgets have been. And the major big headline, which you'll have seen and you'll be aware of, is that the tax increase amounts to 40 billion, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, tax raising budgets ever. Now, Labour's been preparing the ground for this for quite some time, and they've been talking about the state of the public finances that they inherited from the Conservative Party. You'll have heard lots of discussion of this £22 billion black hole. So they have laid the groundwork for moving forward at this budget with really significant tax hikes. They also said that they were not going to increase taxes on working people. Now, as you saw, there was a big debate around what taxes on working people actually meant, and the Labour Party said it was not going to be an increase on national insurance, on income tax or VAT, and there's already a debate about whether or not they have broken that pledge. But the three main taxes, income tax, VAT and national insurance for individuals, were not necessarily touched, although the thresholds, income tax thresholds, remain the same. So of course more people will be dragged into higher rates of taxation. But as you will be very aware, and we'll come on and talk about, there were very significant changes linking into employers' national insurance contributions. And there were also, we won't talk about this so much today, but we're happy to answer questions on it. There were also a number of changes around other areas, around inheritance tax, around capital gains tax. So really placing taxes on, in theory, those that have the broadest shoulders and those who can pay the most. So budgets are always a big moment, this one particularly so. And Rachel Reeves had this opportunity at the very start of this parliament to make some bold decisions. She has taken that opportunity. that opportunity will obviously reduce the closer they get to the next election. And so she said that she doesn't want to have to make such extensive tax changes moving forwards at future budgets. But as we'll come on and talk about, you might want to go on to the next slide. Well, go back slides, but the prospects for growth are very, very poor, as we'll come on and talk about. So there's still an open question about whether or not they will need to have further tax changes in future budgets and substantial tax changes. So we can perhaps talk about that in the discussion to come. And this is still very early days in terms of looking at early hours in terms of looking at the budget. There's always scrutiny of it. It takes a while to fully absorb the interplay of the different tax changes. So there will be likely further fallout from the budget and further analysis of the implications as we head into the next couple of days. So that's a broad overview of the budget and a brief summary of some of the reaction to it. It's pretty much in terms of how the media has viewed the budget. It's fallen very much, as you'd expect, along party lines. So more left-wing. I think someone might just go on mute if you're not on mute. The more left-wing media are very supportive of the budget, the Guardian, the Mirror, and so on. And then on the right, as you can see, the Telegraph saying nightmare on Downing Street and real concerns about it. Others, such as Paul Johnson, who you will know, economic commentators, have also set out some concerns about the impact and the potential for investment moving forward. However, there has been more positive news from international organisations like the IMF. And we should say as well, we'll all remember the Liz Truss budget, and there were real concerns, we know, in the Treasury not to do anything that was going to spook the bond markets. And today, actually, the budget has managed to do that. And so those are all important. Financial markets have also stayed relatively stable after the budget, which is important for the Treasury and, of course, for the wider economy. So coming on to some more of the data in the budget that was announced yesterday, as we've touched on already, growth is the big concern. And really, the budget is a gamble because the government has decided to massively increase taxes on business, and yet at the same time they say they want investment and they want growth, and the prospects for growth are not good. They slightly uptick next year, but then they dip down into the 1.8, 1.5. Those are low levels of growth. The government wants to see growth at least around 2% or more than that to really see a turnaround in the economy and a turnaround in our economic fortunes. So the outlook does not look particularly strong for the UK economy, and that is a real concern for the Treasury. And they're hoping that the significant sums that they put into capital spending, and they change some of the fiscal rules to allow this, some of those significant changes to the NHS, funding for the NHS and to education will flow through and start to really drive the economy. But that is very much yet to be seen. And we've got low levels of productivity and inflation looks stable, but it could be that we do see an uptick in interest rates, mortgage interest rates, as we go forward as a result of the budget yesterday. I think it is more likely that interest rates will go up as a result of the budget yesterday than they will go down. So there has been a stoking of that. So overall, a very interesting budget, a very bold budget, and very clear and significant implications for business. And I'm sure all of you are very aware of that. Any questions at this stage in terms of the general overview, the general picture? Okay, we will move. If anything else, please do put your hand up. Now we're going to move on to talk about some of the specific measures that were outlined yesterday.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Harvey. So I think what yesterday's budget really kind of showed, before we kind of get into some of the specific measures, is that it's really, really important that we're able to kind of have robust data basically at our fingertips. So, when the government are going to be increasing things like national insurance contribution on employers or the national living wage, we really kind of need to be in a position that we can kind of combat that, kind of put out some kind of robust arguments, because really the better data that we have, the more kind of representations we're actually kind of able to make on behalf of the sector into government. And so on this kind of slide here, you'll kind of see we've got a couple of kind of costings related to national insurance contributions and the national living wage. And yesterday we were able to pull this together based on some 2018 data we've got. However, as I'm sure you're all aware, we're in the process of doing a kind of brand new study with Capital Economics, and this piece of work is really kind of looking at the economic contribution that the wholesale sector makes to the UK economy. So if you haven't received any information on that, please do get in touch with me and let me know, because this is a really, really important piece of work that I know members are really keen to do. And we really kind of need your help to input into that and provide some kind of data on your business. And it's something that Capital Economics, will kind of go away and deliver themselves. And we really want to be kind of moving forward with that over the course of the next few weeks. So that's just a bit of kind of context in terms of some of the, I guess, importance of data, really. But in terms of the specifics, I guess the headline announcement really was that the government are going to be increasing the rate of employer national insurance contributions from 13.8% to 15% from the 6th of April next year. And based on our kind of calculations, that represents an additional 30.9 million in yearly national insurance costs for the wholesale sector. However, there is some kind of good news in that the amount of employment allowance will be increased from £5,000 to £10,500. And what that means is that employers can reduce their national insurance contributions bill by up to £10,500. And the final thing, just to kind of say on national insurance contributions, is that employers with bills over £100,000 that weren't eligible for employment allowance, they will now be eligible for that allowance, as that previous kind of ineligibility has been removed from the allowance. So a bit of a mixed bag, but yeah, that's like the kind of main tax the government's brought forward to try and kind of plug some of the hole in, and I guess kind of invest in the NHS really. I guess one of the other kind of big announcements as well was the national living wage increase. So I'm sure you're kind of all aware, but FWD has kind of gave evidence to the Low Pay Commission earlier on in the summer, and the Low Pay Commission really is kind of instructed by the government to kind of set the terms of what the national living wage and indeed the minimum wage will look like. And this was a really, really important piece of work that FWD took part in, because we need to make sure that we have a voice in the debate, and we're able to kind of set out I guess the implications that any future rises will have for wholesalers. I think one of the things we did warn about before the election was that it was very, very likely that an incoming Labour government would want to make an early statement, particularly in making sure that work pays. And they very much have kind of done that in one of their kind of first acts of government. So what that means is that from April 2025, the national living wage will increase to £12.21, which is actually just above what the Low Pay Commission had actually recommended themselves. They've actually gone above and beyond what the Low Pay Commission recommended. And the national minimum wage for 18 to 20-year-olds will increase to £10 for all eligible workers. And the government's also increasing the minimum wage for under 18s and apprentices as well. And the final thing just to say on this slide as well is that there's a piece of work that's going to be launched by the Department for Work and Pensions over the course of the next few weeks. They're going to be publishing a consultation to try and kind of tackle inactivity that we have in the economy. And the Great Britain Working White Paper is going to be launched, and this is really kind of be all about getting people back into work, really. I appreciate it's probably a lot of information on that slide, so I just want to pause in case anybody has any questions. Okay, move on to the next slide then. Excellent.
I think there was a question, maybe from Chris. No,
that was just Chris not being on mute, I think.
Beg your pardon. I'm so sorry, Josh.
It's okay, don't worry. Excellent. We'll move on to the next slide. Thank you, Harvey. So 3 other areas I just wanted to go over here as well. Crime is obviously a very, very important issue that we've been kind of working with FWD on. And there was actually a specific mention of retail crime in the speech. If you kind of listen to the speech, you might have Rachel Reeves this is the direct quote that she mentioned. The government are committing £150 million into tackling kind of serious organised crime over the course of next year. And crime is an issue that we're actively tracking. We've actually got a meeting with the policing minister, Dame Diana Johnson, in December. And the whole purpose of that meeting is to try and kind of discuss the new legislation the government are going to be bringing forward into Parliament over the course of the next few weeks. And they've kind of made a commitment in their manifesto, Labour have that is, to make sure what we want to do is to make sure that any kind of offences that happen to retail workers, that kind of commitment is actually kind of extended to wholesalers as well. So that's something that will hopefully be progressing over the course of the next few weeks. And then the final two pieces as well on the slide here as well is that the government have made a kind of really big investment into roads and potholes. They're looking to kind of tackle and address some of the kind of issues and challenges that people kind of have with potholes, kind of tackling $1 million there. And the final piece here is on breakfast clubs. So you might remember that one of the kind of mainstays of the Labour's manifesto was the introduction of breakfast clubs. And this kind of funding here has been kind of committed to the rollout of breakfast clubs. And the way that this is going to work is that there are going to be 750 schools up and down the country that are kind of signing up for early adoption into the free breakfast clubs at schools. And this £30 million is going to be kind of attributed to, I guess, the early rollout of that scheme before it is then kind of rolled out on a mass scale nationwide. Again, I'll just kind of pause there just to see if anyone's got any questions on those three items. Great. Hand over to Harvey.
Perfect. Thanks, Josh. Now I'm going to talk a bit about kind of the business taxation. So I'll kick off with the corporate tax roadmap. So the Chancellor yesterday announced this roadmap, which is going to last until the end of Parliament. And the key things they announced in this roadmap that will kind of give certainty for businesses as we come through the kind of next few years is that they're going to cap the headline rate of corporation tax at 25%. This was leaked well in advance of the budget, so it wasn't too much of a surprise. But it's certainly something that's going to at least give certainty for businesses as we go through the next 3 years. They also announced that they're going to include permanent full expensing and the £1 million annual investment allowance, which is obviously as part of their main aim at the moment, which is to drive growth and investment in the economy. But the key thing I want to take your attention to is the business rates reform. So kind of the overarching pillar in terms of what the government was looking to do with business rates is they wanted to make it fairer for high streets. And in doing so, I think they have unintentionally kind of penalised the wholesale sector a little bit here. So what they've done is they've introduced permanently lower multipliers for retail, hospitality and leisure properties with a rateable value of under £500,000 from April 2026-2027. But in order to do that, they're going to fund this sustainably via a higher multiplier on properties with a rateable value of £500,000, and they're particularly looking at large warehouse distributions and kind of they're looking at online warehouse giants, kind of the main kind of area which they're focusing on, but I feel that wholesalers will fall into this category as well. So this is certainly an area that we're going to be looking at, and the government is consulting on this. So they've got a 3-month period of discussion, is what they've called it, starting from kind of this week up until the start of next year. So in terms of kind of how this is going to happen, the government is going to be listening to industry. So we're going to be making representations on behalf of the sector to make sure that the wholesale sector is kind of heard and that we're going to be fairly represented so that we're not unfairly penalised. And then in the budget in 2025, the Chancellor will announce the new rates for the business rates, and we'll understand what the higher multiplier could be, and then this will come into force in 2026-2027. So this is certainly kind of a great concern and somewhere that we're going to be kind of keeping an eye on to see how this is going to play out. And then finally, just on this slide as well, the government has also reviewed capital gains tax rates. They have kind of changed the lower and higher main rate of capital gains tax, increasing to 18% and 24% respectively for disposals made on or after 30th of October 2024. So I'll pause here briefly in case anyone has any questions on this at all. No. Okay. Perfect. So next up, I'll cover off kind of the duties that were announced yesterday. So there's quite a few, and there's kind of a few different buckets that you can see here. So I'll start off with the alcohol duties. So the government announced that on draft products, they're going to cut alcohol duty rates below 8.5% alcohol beverage volume by 1.7%. So obviously that's a great boost to the hospitality sector and kind of consumers as well. And when the Chancellor announced that yesterday, there was a big roar in Parliament But what she also went on to announce is that alcohol duty rates on non-draft alcoholic products, which is kind of makes up most of the sector, so that will increase in line with RPI inflation. So that's coming into force in the 1st of Feb. So that would tend to be around 2.7% if we're looking at what RPI is today. There is kind of a win that we did get on this. So we were expecting the government, or what they could have done, sorry, is they could have announced this alcohol duty change coming into force from today, but because of our lobbying, they announced that coming into force on the 1st of February. So we've given businesses time to adapt. Obviously, if you have kind of price marked products, there just isn't the time if you have kind of an announcement coming into force the next day for you to kind of amend your business practices. So we've given some leeway from the Chancellor, which is obviously good news. The next announcement that the Chancellor made is that they're going to abolish the alcohol duty stamp scheme. So this is something that FWD tangentially kind of lobbied for. So kind of a few years ago, so they successfully campaigned for introducing the alcohol wholesaler registration scheme, which turned out to be more successful than the alcohol duty stamp scheme. And they have as such kind of got rid of this because it was more burdensome. So now we're just not sticking with the alcohol duty stamp scheme. So coming on to the soft drinks kind of industry and the sugar tax, so they've announced kind of a big review of the soft drinks industry levy. So they're going to be looking at, firstly, well, increasing the levy over the next 5 years to reflect the 27% CPI inflation between 2018 and 2027. So that's the first thing they're going to do. But they're also going to be reviewing this over the next few months as well. So there's kind of two main things they're going to be looking at here. So the first thing they're going to be looking at is the government will consider whether the 5 gram threshold should be lower. And then the second thing they're going to be looking at as well is the review will look at options to encourage the reformulation of sugary drinks in the higher band, which could involve increasing the higher rate, or it could create a third tax rate for drinks with more than, for instance, 10 grams of sugar per 100 millilitres. So this obviously could have implications across the sector, and we will be kind of speaking to members on this and finding out what our position is, and we will be engaging over the next few months just on this. And then finally, the government also announced 2 initiatives on tobacco. The first one is they're going to renew the tobacco duty escalator at RPI plus 2% on all tobacco products until the end of this Parliament. And they're also going to increase the rate of hand rolling tobacco by a further 10%. And then just finally on vapes, there's going to be a flat rate excise duty on all vaping liquid, which will be marked at £2.20 per 10 millilitre of vaping liquid. And this will also be accompanied by an equivalent one-off increase of £2.20 per 100 cigarettes or 50 grams of tobacco. So kind of lots of duty increases there. But the key thing I think to take away is the soft drinks industry levy review that's going on for the next 3 months. And we will be in touch with members just to find out our position on this. Any questions before I move on? No. And then just finally, just on vehicles and fleet. So you would have seen yesterday, Chancellor announced the fuel duty freeze. So this is kind of a very welcome announcement for the whole of industry. And they've announced that the freeze will last until 2026. And there's going to be the temporary 5p cut in fuel duty. And then they're also going to not increase fuel duty by the planned inflation increase for 2026 as well. So obviously, good news for kind of the wholesale sector and the wider logistics sector on this as well. And then looking ahead, the government is also looking to kind of drive the uptake of electric vehicles, and they've got an initiative here called capital allowances, so for green first year allowances. And what they're doing is they're extending for the first year 100% first year allowances for qualifying expenditure on zero emission cars. And they're also introducing 100% first year allowances for qualifying expenditure on plant machinery for electric vehicle charge points. So kind of big allowances there to kind of drive the uptake of electric vehicles and fleet. And then I know in the last budget, the government announced kind of full capital allowances and for kind of leasing assets. And this was kind of hugely welcomed by industry. So the government is looking to explore this when the fiscal conditions allow. So it's something that they're kind of keeping in their back pocket, and when they need to introduce that, they will do. And then finally, just on the heavy goods vehicle excise duty, they're uprating kind of both the vehicle excise duty in line with RPI from 1st of April 2025, and they're also uprating the HGV levy in line with RPI from 1st of April 2025. So that's kind of a very quick overview of vehicles and fleet. Any questions on those?
Okay, thanks, Harvey and Josh. So moving on to next steps. Obviously, there were some very significant changes which we just ran through there. There were some notable successes which James and we've been working with FWD on over the past months, over the past years, particularly around the freeze in fuel duty and also that delay in the uprating of alcohol duties, as well as additional money for roads, the transport network and measures around crime as well. So there were some very significant punitive tax changes, but also some measures which we were successful in achieving. So that was great to see. And so in terms of what we're going to do next, there will be a number of different consultations, or there are a number of different consultations that have come out of the budget. And so our role is to make sure that we are shaping those consultations. Harvey mentioned the issues around potentially around business tax and making sure that there is the right classification for wholesalers in that business tax reform, and that will be an absolutely critical area for us to focus on as we move forward over the next year. So lots of work for us to do in terms of shaping the announcements yesterday and ensuring that they are as favourable as possible to the wholesale sector. And then as part of that, we will be meeting with James will be meeting with a very wide range of officials in government. We're very connected into a number of different government departments, and we have a wide network of politicians, and we'll be seeking their support as we look to defend the sector moving forward, particularly as I've mentioned on business rates reform, but also on any further increases to the national living wage and areas like the sugar levy as well. So lots of work for us to do in terms of shaping policy and engaging with policymakers and stakeholders in the coming weeks and months. And as part of that, we've got 2 events coming up in the near future. One is a drop-in, which is with parliamentarians at the beginning of December. So that is a way for us to meet with parliamentarians from across all political parties. And of course, there are lots of new parliamentarians for us to develop relationships with. And we'll be meeting directly with them in December to explain wholesale, to explain the importance of the sector and explain all of the good work that you do and why we need their support. So that's the first event that we're doing. And then we also have a dinner where we will have a more in-depth discussion with really leading politicians early on in the new year. And we've got further events planned throughout next year to really help raise the profile of wholesale, continue to raise the profile of wholesale, and to underline the needs and the support that the sector needs. And then Josh mentioned it earlier, a plea for us as well. We are doing a report with Capital Economics, which sets out the economic contribution of the sector. And that report is really crucial for us to show the value that you will bring, the value of the sector, and to help us to defend the sector. So please do respond to appeals to contribute to the survey to inform that report. If we have enough contributions, it will be a really useful piece of data for us to engage with politicians on and to help fend off further punitive regulatory changes on the sector. So please do help us on all the surveys. And also, of course, if you have a depot that people can come and visit, or MPs can come and visit, or you're able to engage directly with MPs, please let James and Lindsay and ourselves know, and we would be very happy to support setting up a parliamentary visit as well. They're really helpful ways for us to show what the sector does at first hand and to build support. Any questions? Take down the slides. James, anything that you would like us to pick up on?
No, I think that's very comprehensive. You've stunned everyone into silence. I'm sure they do have lots of worries and concerns, questions, things we're going to be working on over the coming months. But yes, as always, we are here to help. So if you've got any points that you want to raise separately to the meeting, please do let us know. Obviously, we work very closely with the team at DGA who are here to help. And as Catherine said, we've got a couple of big set pieces coming up in the coming weeks and months, which will help with all of this. But, you know, the better information we've got, the more we can shout about numbers like the £110 million impact on the sector through the national insurance and national living wage increases. So that's absolutely vital to be able to contextualise these budget measures and the impact that has on jobs and serving the nation with food and drink. So thank you very much for providing that information. And as Catherine says, please do continue to do so, or do so if you haven't done so already. I think that's probably it from me. Any final thoughts, Catherine, Harvey, Josh?
No, just to say thank you all very much. If, as James says, if we can help with any more specific detail on the tax changes, and of course it's not just the individual tax changes, but the interplay of those tax changes. Of course, they're cumulative, they're not standalone. And also they build on other, it's not just the budget yesterday, but we've had other policy changes coming through the package around workers' rights that's come through. There are going to be further measures that come through that impact on business that then add to what was announced yesterday in the budget. So there are many businesses that are really concerned about what Labour's doing and about the really significant impact it will have on them. We will be working very hard to make representations on behalf of the sector. But if you have any specific queries or if we can support further, please don't hesitate to let us know.
Yeah, fantastic. We had I think a question there from David Armstrong saying, can we circulate the slides? Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And we've got a recording of the session as well. One other thing I would mention is, it may not have escaped your notice, it's the US elections next Tuesday. Going to be fairly seismic no matter what happens. And I know that the team at DGA will be organising a series of webinars post-election to try and understand that. So we'll send out the links to those as well next week. So
Or happy to do a specific wholesale, if that's helpful, specific wholesale webinar.
Fantastic. Great. Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time. And as I say, if you've got any questions or need any more information, please do let us know. And yeah, we'll speak soon.